So I know that sometimes I complain about JavaScript, but this is one of my favorite JavaScript features. So I'm going to show you a file that's part of the starter code. So under server, there's a model folder, and models refer to like data models. We use those to specify like our Mongo document format. We use those also for like any other type of data we need. So I've already created for you this file called competencies.json, and it's a simple JSON file with an array of strings or a list of strings. Excuse me. So these are all of the employability competencies. And what would be an improvement for our web app is right now we make the user type in the employability competency. And that's problematic if we want the user to be able to like view all of their journal entries for problem solving. Because what if they like misspelled solving at one point? Or what if they wrote it as solving problems instead of problem solving? Like just a moment ago, I wrote digital communication instead of communication digital, right? It would be hard for us to like look through that data. So this is what is really cool about JavaScript. So we already have this JSON file. We can turn this into a JavaScript object in a single line of code. So let's go to router.js. And up at the top here, after we create our route object, I'm going to show you an easy way to assign static data. In this particular case, for example, it's an array of strings to a variable. So I'm going to say const employability competencies. Oh my goodness. No, that's really long. Let's just say competencies. Let's get in. If I can spell it, competencies. There we go. Here's how we do it. We use the require, like we've used to import a node module, but instead we're going to require the JSON file. Because it basically just pulls it in as a JavaScript object, which is great. We have to specify the relative path to that file. And we haven't done a lot with relative paths yet, but right now the router.js file is inside the routes folder, and we need to get to competencies.json in the model folder. So we actually have to go up one level of folders, and we do that with 2 dots. That means up a level in terms of our folder tree. And then we'll type model, and then we'll type competencies.json. And it knows what we're doing, so you get like this confirmation from IntelliSense that, oh, good, like my paths are right. And we'll add a semicolon there. And then down here when we did render create entry, one thing I mentioned when we first took a look at EJS is we can pass arguments to the EJS file and then use those inside the EJS file. And here's how we do that. We just add an extra argument to the render function, which is a JavaScript object. So we're going to create an object literally here with our curly brackets. I'm going to have a property called comps, short for competencies, and I'm going to assign it the value of competencies up here. Oh, and then I need a closing bracket. There you go. This is another potentially confusing thing. Something's wrong here. What did I do wrong? So many brackets. Nope. Oh, right there. Thank you. Another potential source of confusion, variables are scoped to individual JavaScript files unless we export them and require them elsewhere. So this variable competencies is only accessible within this file. By passing this JavaScript object to the create entry EJS file, it will be the variables that are accessible within the create entry EJS files are the property names here, not the variable name here. Okay. So to make that super clear, when we go to create entry.ejs now, so let's do that. We're going to refer to the right variable. So where's our text field? Here's our text field. So we're going to get rid of the text entry and we're going to replace it with like a selector that the user can select from all of our employability competencies. We could type all this into this file, and that would be really tedious. So we don't want to do that. What I'm going to show you is the power of EJS, where we can dynamically generate the HTML based on the variables we pass into the EJS file. So we're going to use a new type of HTML element called a field set. And inside the field set, we're going to have a legend. Think of the legend as kind of like the label. So our legend is going to be employability competencies. So that's our legend. And actually, I left the label stuff here, which I should not have done. All right, now we have the date, we have the journal entry, field set, legend, employability competencies. And now we're going to write a JavaScript for loop inside our EJS file. So this is where we use that symbol less than % to say like, hey, everything in here is JavaScript code. Evaluate it, take the output and paste that into the HTML and then send it to the client. So now we just write JavaScript code for let competency of comps. So notice I have to use the variable name comps here because that was the property we defined in router.js. Every property we define for this object becomes an accessible variable in this EJS file. Okay. So a little bit of indirection, but super powerful. This might seem a little weird. We actually close out our escape pattern here with like the opening curly bracket, but not what comes next. So like this is JavaScript code, but what we're going to iterate over with our for loop is the HTML we want to generate. And so that isn't inside the escape stuff. I know this seems weird. So now I just start typing HTML. So I'm going to say label. And then I'm going to say input, and we're going to use a new type of input. We're going to use a radio button. And I'm going to make it of class competencies. And I'm going to give it a name as well of competencies. And then I have to give it a value. Helps if I spell it right. And the value, this is the dynamic part. I want the value to be the value of this variable competency. So since I want that variable to be evaluated by the EJS engine, I have to use the following syntax to make that happen. So less than % equal sign. And I know this is getting confusing, but we'll get used to it. And then close that out. So that's the value. The label finishes. I need a quote. I need to close the input. Save it so it gets formatted a little bit better. And then I have an open curly bracket here. I need to close it after this label. So I'm going to do that. Just kidding. Curly bracket. There we go. So this curly bracket is balanced. you'll notice that now we're using 3 different type of like escape sequences in EJS. I'll add a slide that documents that for us. But to review the 3 types, here's one for including less than % with a dash. Okay, I think we only use that for includes. For JavaScript code, less than %, no dash. That's for JavaScript code to evaluate. For variables, less than % equal sign. I don't have a good mnemonic to help you out with that, but you do have examples at least you can look at. Yeah, question? What is what? Include basically says grab this other EJS file, like the header one, and just paste it in here. And it's so that the reason why we use it is otherwise, as we create more and more different EJS files, so much of the beginning and the end would be the same HTML code. And then when we want to make a change, we have to make it in a dozen files instead of one. We got one more thing to do. We're going to go to createentry.js. And we already have our event listener code here. We have to change it because we were looking for what they typed in the text box here. And we're going to do a more sophisticated approach now. So let's add a comment. A more I'm struggling with the spelling today. Sophisticated, yes. A more sophisticated select that selects all input elements of a class habit that are checked. So I know I've been going back and forth between the proper use of class versus ID. In this case, I think class is appropriate for the things, not habit, we called it competencies. Sorry, last year we were all focused on habits of mind and not employability competencies. And so I'm still in that mindset. So I do think a class is appropriate here. So we're going to create another variable, which is EC buttons for employability competency buttons. Document dot. Here we use query selector all, like you used in the lab practicum. So we want to select all elements that are of type, or the element type is input. The class is habit. No, it's not. It's competency. And there's another syntax we can use with query selector where we can use a colon and specify like its value. We want it to be checked. So this is super efficient because this way we get a list of all radio buttons that are checked, that are of class competency. Otherwise, we would have to like loop through it and check if it's checked and then like deal with that. We don't have to do that. Super easy. All right. So const employability competency. Now we can just say, we don't have to do a query selector. We can instead say EC buttons. So that's going to be an array. So let's get the length of that. If the length is greater than 0, meaning they actually clicked on something, then get the value of the first element in the list. Otherwise, return null. Oh, yeah. Oops. Sorry. Where'd my code go? Did you all study this in APCSA? No? Good. You shouldn't. No. So this, you know how we have operators that have one operand, like to make something positive or negative, that is one operand, or like to negate something with the exclamation point. Most of our operators have 2 operands, like all our mathematical ones. This is called the ternary operator. It has 3 operands. And so let me add a comment above this. The ternary operator, when I used to teach APCSA, I referred to it as like the devil spawn of C because I think it's so confusing. And yet here I am using it in our JavaScript code. What it means is this. It means const. So you can type this for documentation if you want, but you don't have to. It means if EC buttons dot length is greater than 0, employability competency equals EC buttons dash 0 dot value else equals null. Ternary operator means is a shortcut for an if-else statement. So yeah, so the question mark is in ternary operator. So the condition of the if-else comes before the question mark. The value of the value that will be returned from this expression is between the question mark and the colon if the condition is true, and the value that's returned from this expression if the condition is false is after the colon and before the semicolon. It shows up a lot in JavaScript. I'm so glad you asked what that meant. We don't focus on it in AP Computer Science A because it's hard. It's like hard enough already. We don't need to add this in. You never need to use it. You can always write an if else. But you can see, like, for conciseness, I've got like one statement here versus like all of this instead. So, all right, let's take a quick look at this. And then I know a couple of you need a hand getting things up and running. So I accidentally stopped my server. Let me start it again. Look at what Chrome looks like. I'll hit create entry. Huh, doesn't work. What did I do wrong? Anyone know? We don't have any labels here. Let's see if it's something simple. For let competency of comps. Did we call it comps? We did call it comps. Oh, here? Yeah, we do. You are absolutely correct. Thank you. So we gave it a value, which is good. But then right before the labels here, we need to actually have a label. So again, we're going to use the same expression, less than, percent equal, competency, percent greater than. Now we have a value. Yeah, we had nothing between the label tags. Good catch. Refresh. There we go. So much better. I can select a date. I can now select a competency. I can hit submit. We need to change our log here to actually log it better, but we can do that later. This is a good place to stop for today.